Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel, forcing the Wanda to marry me, practicing the method of swallowing the stars. Chapter 21. At the foot of the mountain. Dr. Phil rode the zipline and stopped in a clearing in a dense forest. As soon as he untied the hook on his body, the man heard a sound of the air being cut in the sky behind him. Turning his head to look, he immediately saw that familiar figure chasing in his direction. After Dr. Phil made an angry sound, he hurriedly ran to a wooden house in the open space. After a while, an off-road vehicle roared out and rushed out in the opposite direction of Shumo. Dr. Phil, who was driving the vehicle, saw the figure approaching at great speed in the rearview mirror. In his anxiety, he stepped on the accelerator of the vehicle to the bottom. But obviously, no matter how good the performance of the car is, it cannot be as good as flying units in this kind of terrain. At this time, Shumo was less than 50 meters away from him. Dr. Phil took a pistol from the car, stretched his left hand holding the gun out of the window, and shot Shumo in the sky. Unfortunately, pistol bullets do not pose any threat to Shumo now. Shumo easily dodged all the bullets. Instead, Dr. Mayfair was so distracted that he completely failed to notice a fallen tree lying in the middle of the road ahead. By the time he saw it and tried to dodge, it was already too late. Click. The car, which was traveling at nearly 150 kilometers per hour, hit a tree and successfully took off. After rolling for a while, the car flew towards the dense forest on the roadside. Finally, the car was placed on a big tree next to it. Dr. Phil in the car shook his head hard, trying to clear his dizzy brain. Just at this time, Shumo caught up from behind, slowly floating directly in front of the car. Shumo looked at Dr. Phil, whose face was covered in blood in the cab of the car, and the corners of his mouth raised slightly. "Sir, this is not a good place to park." After saying that, he flew up and kicked the car down from the tree. "No!" Feeling the weightlessness, the doctor screamed with horror on his face. "You must know that at this time, the height of the car from the ground is at least 7 or 8 meters. If the landing posture is wrong, he may just tell you here." However, the moment the car was about to touch the ground, it was directly supported by an inexplicable force. Shumo used psychokinesis to control the vehicle and slowly fall to the ground. He stepped forward and pulled down the deformed door, then pulled the other person out of the cab and threw it on the ground aside. "Do you want to introduce yourself directly, or do you want to wait until I torture you?" I said. After experiencing a series of stimulations, Dr. Phil's heart was already a little broken. He hurriedly started to introduce himself. As he spoke, Shumo also understood the identity of this person. His name is Phil Andrew, a former researcher under Stryker. In the last battle that destroyed Lake Yakale, he escaped because he was not in the base. Over the years, he secretly developed a technology that could transfer healing factors into saber-toothed tigers. After that, he designed to capture the saber-toothed tiger, and then use the remaining control potions in his hand to control the saber-toothed tiger. The purpose is to transfer the other party's healing factors into one's own body. This transfer technology requires the use of adamantium. He does have the recipe for adamantium, but one of the most important materials is missing. Vibranium. After many investigations, he found Ulysses. This is what happened before. "Do you have the recipe for adamantium?" "That's right, and the rest of the metals needed to synthesize adamantium have been gathered in the previous laboratory. As long as there is vibranium, adamantium can be synthesized directly." The other party quickly explained. Obviously, he hopes that by showing his value, the other party will spare his life. Shumo raised his lips slightly. "Although I made a mistake in my judgment, I didn't encounter the mind control mutants I expected here, so I gained points. But if you can get the adamantium formula, your time is not wasted." At that moment, he called Avril Lavigne and asked her to transport the vibranium left on the private plane. He picked up Phil with one hand and flew towards the location of the previous laboratory. The next day, a plane slowly rose from the Appalachian Mountains and disappeared into the sky at high speed. A moment later, there was a violent explosion. In the cabin, Shumo looked at a complete set of armor made of adamantium and vibranium in front of him. Different from Tony's, his equipment, which is entirely made of vibranium, is more appropriately called armor. This armor is dark black in color, streamlined, and does not contain any electronic components inside. After all, with the presence of psychokinesis, he does not need those power assistance systems. The main function of this armor is to protect and facilitate his psychokinesis control. 16 flying knives made of adamantium are distributed on both sides of the armor's legs and arms. In addition to the flying knife, he also built a combat knife for close combat. The sword is also made of adamantium, and there is a scabbard specially designed to hold the sword on the back of the armor. Open the system store. After a lot of fighting, his points now have reached 27,000. First, I searched for storage equipment in the mall. Soon, a list appeared in front of him. Storage ring level F contains 1,000 cubic meters of space, points required for redemption, 3,000 points. Storage ring E level contains 1 million cubic meters of space, points required for redemption, 20,000 points. Storage ring SS level contains 1 million cubic kilometers of space, points required for redemption, 300,000 points. World Lord World D level refined from the World Lord Small World, the space has a diameter of 100,000 kilometers and can store living creatures. Points required for redemption, 1 million points. God's Kingdom Crystal D level, it is refined by God's Kingdom after the death of an ordinary immortal strongman. There is a file size space with a diameter of 1 million kilometers inside. Points required for redemption, 10 million points. The various storage items on the list made Shumo's eyes warm. Not to mention anything else, the D-level World Lord alone can fit the entire Earth into it. After all, the diameter of the Earth is only over 10,000 kilometers. However, the points needed for redemption later made Shumo calm down. After thinking for a while, he only exchanged it for an F-level storage ring. The current points are limited and should be used to improve strength. Moreover, the things redeemed by the system can be stored in the system space. The storage space of 1,000 cubic meters is enough for him for the time being. A space of 10 meters in length, width and height. Ordinary family cars can fit hundreds of them. Congratulations to the host, you have obtained an F-level storage ring, which cost 3,000 points. The system prompt has just gone off. An ordinary ring appeared in his hand. The ring is just an ordinary ring shape, and you can't tell what material it is made of. Putting the ring on his finger, he then explored psychokinesis towards the ring. After psychokinesis came into contact with the ring, he instantly sensed a square space with a length, width and height of 10 meters, and the shape of this space could be changed at will as he wished. Good, Shumo nodded with satisfaction. With a slight wave towards the armor on the side, the armor appeared in the storage ring. By the time Shumo returned home, it was already close to noon. Just after returning to the villa, a servant came up to report that a man claiming to be an FBI agent was visiting. FBI. A trace of doubt appeared on Shumo's face. In the past, his only interaction with the FBI was that every time he watched a movie, he would be warned by the other party at the beginning. As for seeing a real person, this is really the first time. A few minutes later, in the reception room, a tall woman sat across from Shumo. The woman was wearing a black tights, which outlined her beautiful figure. Her hair was neatly tied behind her head, and she had a pair of blue eyes, looking at Shumo with a hint of curiosity. Hello, my name is Maria Hill, from the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. Before she came, she thought that Shu would be a tall, muscular man with arms as thick as thighs. After all, she knew Jin Bin's information very well. To be able to kill a kingpin who is covered in muscles, at least the opponent's size should be no different. But I never thought that the other person was such a well-proportioned man with fair skin. After the two shook hands, Shumo's eyes showed a hint of surprise. No wonder when I first saw the other party, I looked familiar. It was only when I heard the name that I realized that the other party was Agent Hill, the second largest commander in S.H.I.E.L.D. In an instant, he also figured out the context. Obviously, S.H.I.E.L.D. learned the news about killing Kingpin from the Black Widow Natasha Romanoff. He could also guess the other party's purpose. It's nothing more than persuading myself to join S.H.I.E.L.D. Sure enough, the other party's first sentence confirmed his guess. Mr. Shu, I am here this time on behalf of the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau to invite you to join. Hill handed the information in his hand to Shumo with a serious look. Shumo took the information from the other party's hand, glanced at it casually, and then threw it on the table in front of him. Then he chuckled and looked at Hill opposite. Leave the life of a rich man and risk your life to fight those gangsters. Ms. Hill, I don't think this is a good idea. Regarding Shumo's rejection, Hill did not show any surprise. Thinking from his perspective, if she were the other party, she would not be able to join this organization. Smiling, she took out a tablet from her bag and opened a video on it. Hand it to Shumo. I think you will change your mind after reading this. Shumo's expression changed. He reached out to take the computer from the other person's hand, and looked at it carefully. The scene in the video is in a hall. It was filled with mutants of different shapes, and judging from the situation, they seemed to be discussing something. Judging from the shooting angle, it should have been secretly taken by a mutant. An old man wearing a metal helmet sat above the hall. Magneto, Brotherhood. Almost instantly, Shumo guessed that it was the scene inside the Brotherhood. What they were discussing was exactly how to make him a member of the Brotherhood of Mutants. Of course, their main goal is the huge property owned by Shumo. After watching the video, Shumo's face darkened. He was not too surprised that the organization behind Kingpin and Red Tank was the Brotherhood of Mutants. He had made some guesses about this before, but what puzzled him was why the other party was so eager to get a large amount of funds. Could it be that they are planning another big move? Originally, I was too lazy to care about the other party. If something happened, the X-Men would naturally stop them, but since the plot was on me, don't blame yourself for being rude. Fortunately, I got the news in advance. Otherwise, you never know when you will be plotted by the other party. How about, if you join us, we can help you deal with these people. Agent Hill continued to advise. I'm afraid I'll help you. S.H.I.E.L.D. cannot sit idly by when these mutants are causing trouble. After all, the original intention of their establishment was to deal with these anti-human organizations. To put it mildly, it was to help themselves. In fact, he just wanted to use himself to deal with these mutants. Regarding Shumo's purpose of seeing through them, Agent Hill did not show any surprise on his face, but looked at him seriously. It makes no difference. After all, they do threaten your safety, don't they? Shumo thought for a moment and looked up at Hill. Indeed, what you said is correct. But it's a pity that I don't plan to join any organization, but we can cooperate. Oh, what kind of cooperation? Hill looked stunned for a moment, then asked. This time I can join forces with you to deal with these mutants. As a thank you for providing information this time, I can take action once and help you deal with some difficult troubles. Of course, if the cooperation is happy, we can conduct such transactions in the future. Every time you provide me with the information I need, I can help you take action. After this incident, Shumo also realized the importance of intelligence. If Hill hadn't come looking for him, he might have suffered a hidden loss. Although S.H.I.E.L.D. has almost become Serpentine in S.H.I.E.L.D., it is undeniable that except for the information about Hydra that may be false, the other intelligence networks about the various forces are still very powerful. Besides, you won't suffer any loss by doing this. Those who need to be dealt with by S.H.I.E.L.D. are most likely not good people. He originally needed to deal with these people to gain points. In this way, not only can I deal with these people with help, but I don't have to worry about the aftermath at all. It's like killing two birds with one stone. Hearing this, Hill opposite him shook his head. I need to seek the opinion of our commander on this matter. Certainly, Shumo nodded. Let Hill take the phone and walk out of the room. Less than 10 minutes. Hill came back again. A pleasure to work with. I will be your only contact from now on. No one in S.H.I.E.L.D. will know any information about you except me and the director. By the way, someone will send you information about the Brotherhood of Mutants later. After sending Hill away, Shumo sat there and meditated. Now he's on the Brotherhood's radar. Since the other party wants to take action against him, he will not sit still and wait for death. Although, in the movie universe alone, the power shown by Lao Wan at his peak was able to move several thousand tons of nuclear submarines. But in a real fight, it's hard to say who will win. After all, psychokinesis can control almost any object, and his body is much stronger than his opponent. Moreover, he still has a powerful weapon in his hand to deal with them. Thinking of this, Shumo came to the study room on the top floor of the villa. When he came to the bookshelf, he pressed a button hidden behind the book. The bookshelf slowly moved aside, revealing a room of about 30 square meters behind. Step into the room. The walls inside the room are filled with all kinds of firearms. Desert Eagle, M500 revolver, AK, Remington shotgun, Barrett heavy sniper. These are all collected by Shumo over the years. With a gentle wave of his right hand, he put these firearms into the storage ring. After collecting them, Shumo came to the innermost low-temperature refrigerator that was half a person tall. Opening the box, apart from a few special firearms, there were square magazines neatly arranged in the rest of the boxes. Take one out and open the magazine. What are neatly arranged inside are not bullets, but tiny needles. Take out a syringe. The needle tube is filled with a light yellow liquid. These were all obtained by Shumo through special means 2 years ago, mutant antidote. As an ordinary person before, he naturally had to use some trump cards to deal with mutants. This thing, combined with his mental psychokinesis, is simply unstoppable for mutants. Receive all the thousands of syringes in the box into the storage ring. He has already tested it with a watch. The time in the storage ring is in a static state, so there is no need to worry about it deteriorating. With this thing in hand, he is not afraid of any mutants. As soon as I finished packing these things, there was a sound of the door opening and closing outside. Honey, what are you doing? Hearing this familiar voice, Shumo's eyes moved. This does not seem to be Wanda's voice. After all, although the relationship between the two has eased a lot, the other party has never called her this way so far. When he walked out of the room where weapons were stored, he immediately saw a tall figure standing in front of the desk, looking at him with a smile on his face. Wait, why are you here? After seeing the man's face clearly, Shumo rubbed his eyes with a look of surprise on his face. The person in front of him was none other than his last girlfriend, Anne Hathaway. Seeing the look on Shumo's face, Annie chuckled and stepped forward. Put your hands around the back of his neck. Why can't I show up here? No. Before he could finish speaking, Annie came up directly. Don't be like this, my wife is downstairs. Wouldn't this be more exciting? By the time the two of them arrived downstairs, it was already half an hour later. The three of them were sitting at the dining table. It seems like someone from the FBI was looking for you just now. Did something happen? Wanda took a sip of soup and asked casually. Oh, it's nothing, just some routine inquiries because of Peter's matter. Shumo responded casually. Regarding S.H.I.E.L.D., he didn't intend to say anything. She is just an ordinary person now, it is better not to let her get involved in these things. After a pause, Shumo glanced at the two of them and asked, pretending not to care. You two, you don't know the employees of your company, do you? Wanda asked strangely. Of course I know each other. I mean, how did you two get together, and, it seems like you have a good relationship. When he was upstairs just now, he was led astray by Annie before he could ask. It wasn't until this moment that I asked the doubts in my heart. Oh, Annie and we met at the company. Wanda looked up and glanced at him. Yeah, Shumo nodded. Some time ago, because Wanda was a little bored staying in the villa all day, she asked Shumo to arrange a position for her in the film and television company. Unexpectedly, the two of them became best friends. If there was no active calculation by Anne, he would not believe it 100%. But that's it, it's too late to say anything now. At this time, Shumo felt a silky feeling on his legs under the table. Look up. Anne winked at him. This little fairy is simply amazing. After an exciting lunch, Wanda sent Annie out. Throughout noon, Annie was always provoking him intentionally or unintentionally. Could it be that the other party has awakened some strange attribute? Force this thought out of my mind. After a while, Shumo looked at Wanda walking back. I'm afraid you need to go out and hide for a while. Although the Brotherhood's goal is its own assets and it is almost impossible to take action against Wanda and the others, Shumo has to prevent this from happening. Looking at Wanda, who looked confused, he explained the matter of the Brotherhood. I'm sorry, it's because of the two of us that we got into such trouble. A trace of apology appeared on Wanda's face. It's nothing, haven't you already compensated me? A hint of teasing flashed across Shumo's smiling face. Although Shumo got her person first without getting her heart, it turns out that after getting the other person's heart, he can indeed unlock some special gameplay. Hearing this, Wanda's face turned red instantly. I'll go upstairs to clean up. Shumo looked at the red car that disappeared from sight and breathed a sigh of relief. Later, he went to the gym on the top floor alone. He has asked people to clear out all the equipment in the gym, and it has now become his practice room. If you want to completely solve the Brotherhood's troubles, you still need to improve your strength as soon as possible. After redeeming the storage ring, he still had more than 20,000 points left. Open the mall list, enter the treasures that enhance your strength, and after searching for them, Shumo checked them one by one. Heart-shaped grass. After taking it, it slowly improves people's physical fitness. Points required for redemption. 300 points. Plant. Dragon blood. Made from the heart blood of king-level dragon beasts. After use, physical fitness can be increased by 2 to 4 times. Valid at apprentice level. Points required for redemption. 5,000 points. Millennium Willow Heart. The spirit of plants and trees, contains huge vitality energy. After taking it, it can greatly enhance your physical fitness and cell activity. Enhance the body's recovery ability. Points required for redemption. 18,000 points. Bebo Marrow. After taking psychokinesis, the spirit will be greatly improved. Points required for redemption. 100,000 points. Drop. Red Flame Fruit. After taking it, your physical fitness will be greatly improved. Points required for redemption. 100,000 points. Piece. There are so many treasures to choose from. Shumo was dazzled by what he saw. But after taking a look at the points, I actually didn't have much choice. After a while, Shumo sat cross-legged on the ground, with a 1-meter-long green crystal suspended in front of him. Is this the Millennium Willow Heart? I looked at the crystal carefully. The shell of the crystal is very hard, and there seems to be green liquid flowing inside. Shumo checked its instructions. The method of use is to break its hard shell and consume the liquid inside. He took out an adamantium flying knife and used it to lightly scratch the crystal shell, creating a small crack on it. Seeing the liquid inside pouring out from the crack, Shumo didn't hesitate and put the crystal directly to his mouth, letting the green jelly-like viscous liquid flow into his mouth. There is a fragrance of vegetation in the mouth. As soon as the liquid entered his body down his throat, he felt a cool breath spreading through his body. As this cool feeling flows through the body, physical fitness gradually improves. At the same time, the dark golden ball in his mind spun again, releasing streams of pure mental power. These mental powers were continuously absorbed by the brain, enhancing his mental psychokinesis. The two energies do not interfere with each other in his body, rapidly improving his strength. As his strength improved, Shumo also felt a special energy gradually penetrate into his body. Feel the endless feeling in your body after absorbing this energy. Is this what is called vital energy? As this energy seeps in, a warm feeling spreads throughout the body. In this soothing feeling, the rapid increase in strength is simply not too satisfying. The whole process lasted more than 2 hours. As the speed of improvement stopped, Shumo slowly opened his eyes. At this time, there was a layer of dark brown impurities attached to the surface of his skin. After cleaning these things first, I returned to the practice room feeling relaxed. Open the Properties panel. Name: Shumo. Age: 20 years old. Strength: 93,560 kg. Speed: 386 meters s. Psychokinesis: 387,600 kg. Special ability: none. Points: 6,160 points. Shumo's eyes shone with excitement. The body exerts 93 tons of force and psychokinesis exerts 387 tons of force. Compared with before, it has increased by more than 6 times. Moreover, the Millennium Willow Heart also has a major effect, which is to enhance the body's recovery ability. Thinking of this, he took out a throwing knife and lightly scratched his arm. The sound of a dull knife cutting cowhide was heard, and a shallow white mark appeared on the arm where the adamantium flying knife had scratched. Seeing this scene, Shumo paused and let out a sound of surprise. Holy shit, although I know that the so-called body improvement is an all-round improvement. But he didn't expect the defense to reach this level. You must know that although he only made a slight stroke, it was based on his power of more than 90 tons. Even if he has deliberately restrained himself, his strength is no less than a few hundred kilograms. Not to mention ordinary people, even steel would be cut like tofu under this power, but it would only leave a faint white mark on his skin. Judging from this level of defense, I'm afraid even a sniper rifle can't hurt him at all. After calming down his excitement, Shumo gradually increased the power on the flying knife. It wasn't until nearly 2 tons of force was used that a slender blood mark was scratched on the skin. But before the blood could flow out from the wound, the skin on both sides of the wound closed unusually quickly under his gaze. This resilience, Shumo's eyes moved. The recovery speed was much stronger than the recovery ability of the saber-toothed tiger he had seen before. So perverted, it can be said that a 1,000-year-old Lu Muxin directly increased his combat effectiveness by a dozen times. After a while, a figure flew out of the villa at extremely fast speeds. Shumo's current flying speed exceeds Mach 2. It's about 700 meters per second, and the speed is about 2,500 kilometers per hour. In less than 3 minutes, he arrived at a mountain range in New Jersey, more than 100 kilometers away from the villa. Less than half a minute had passed since Shumo took off. SHIELD headquarters. In Nick Fury's office. Coulson walked in hurriedly. Director, Major Crisis. After hearing this, Nick Fury's expression changed. The last time he heard this, Tony was still wearing a suit and fighting with Iron Overlord in the sky of New York. Coulson handed the tablet into his hand. A high-speed UFO was spotted over New York. Nick Fury looked at the data on the tablet. Mach 2, Tony Stark. No, I just got the news that Tony is staying in his Seaview villa. Since Tony Iron Man's identity was exposed, he has naturally become the focus of S.H.I.E.L.D. It locates the opponent's location almost 24 hours a day. This is why Coulson knew the flying figure was not Tony for the first time. Nick Fury reached out and slid his hand on the tablet, looking at the flight path of the UFO. Wait a minute, could it be him in this position? The starting location of the UFO was very close to Shimmer's villa by the Hudson River. He was almost sure of it. This UFO is probably related to Shumo. However, he did not intend to release the information about Shumo. In the past few years, he has also noticed that some forces have infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. It is better to keep some information secret, because he may not know when it will become a life-saving trump card for him. Thinking of this, he handed the tablet back to Coulson. Delete this incident from the recorder and pretend it never happened. Coulson had a surprised look on his face when he heard the other party's answer. However, as an agent, he did not question the director's order. After nodding, he left the room. Nick Fury looked at the closed door and sighed secretly in his heart. It seems that we need to re-examine the opponent's strength. Shumo, wearing battle armor, was floating in front of a rock wall in the mountains. He planned to experiment to see how far his strength had reached. After taking a deep breath, Shumo made a fist with his right hand and smashed it against the rock wall. With twice the power, plus about half of the psychokinesis blessing, nearly 400 tons of force hit the rock. There was an explosion of air. Boom! Huge amounts of explosions echoed throughout the mountains. On the rock wall, a huge amount of spider web was centered on his fist and slowly spread. As Shumo retracted his fist, it seemed to cause a chain reaction. The entire rock wall fell with a crashing sound, and a moment later, a huge hole with a diameter of hundreds of meters appeared on the rock wall. In the dense forest at the foot of the mountain, countless birds started to fly. He nodded with satisfaction. Now his physical strength can almost defeat Hulk and Spider-Man. After all, just like Spider-Man's most glorious achievement, stopping a moving train only requires more than 50 tons of force. Just when he was about to try psychokinesis to control the flying knife, the cyclone around the Star Tower in his mind made a slight fluctuation. At the same time, bursts of gunfire came from the dense forest in the distance. Shumo made a move. This is the first time that the Star Tower has fluctuated in such a long time after obtaining it. But after waiting for a while, nothing unusual appeared. Take a deep breath. According to his current strength, he is indeed still far from activating the Star Tower. Turn to look into the distance. The location of the gunshot was in the dense forest 1 kilometer away from him. Due to the obstruction of trees, I couldn't see clearly what was going on over there. After just a moment of hesitation, he moved and quietly flew in that direction. After a while, Shumo hid in the dense branches of a tree and looked towards the open space not far away. A group of robots, 7 or 8 meters tall, surrounded a woman in the middle with blonde hair and white clothes. The woman seemed to be seriously injured. Her right hand was covering her left shoulder, and there was a large blood stain on her clothes. He raised his head and glanced at the robots coming up around him. There was anger in the woman's eyes. In an instant, the skin on her body turned into dazzling diamonds, and she broke out in the direction Shumo came from. White Queen, seeing this scene in front of him, Shumo, who was hiding among the trees, had a surprised look on his face. This ability is really special. As far as he knew, it seemed that only the White Queen in the world had this ability to become a diamond. The robots surrounding her are probably the famous sentry robots. Combined with the previous fluctuations of the Star Tower, Shumo quickly understood. In addition to having the ability to turn into diamonds all over the body, White Queen also has the ability to telepathize like Professor X. The previous fluctuations in the Star Tower were probably due to the White Queen activating ability towards his position. After all, the noise he made before was not small, and it was normal for her to find out. As for the purpose, Shumo guessed that she might be asking for help here, or trying to control the people here to help her stop these sentry robots. The White Queen, who was rushing towards Shumo, was blocked by the robot. After the body surface of these robots flipped for a while, the outer skin turned into diamond skin like the White Queen. Seeing this strange scene, Shumo was surprised. No wonder the mutants were finally cornered by these sentry robots. This kind of ability is really too perverted. Ability to easily copy various mutants. Almost any mutant is disabled by relative ability. The White Queen was fighting left and right among these robots, but was unable to break through. Shumo, who was hiding in the tree branches, looked at the scene below. To save or not to save? Without any hesitation, Shumo made his choice. White Queen possesses alpha-level mutant ability, making her a very suitable helper in forming a force. With her ability, she doesn't have to worry about betrayal by her subordinates. Although the telepathy ability redemption points in the mall only require 30,000 points, Shumo has already checked with the system and found out that the redeemed abilities are in a state just after awakening. In other words, after redeeming this ability, it is in the initial state. It will take time to slowly gain control after that. With all this time, he might as well use it to practice the secret arts of the illusionist lineage that is a master of the gods' telekinesis. After all, that is more powerful than this telepathic ability. After making the decision, Shumo no longer hesitated. Judging from the situation in the open space, the White Queen may die at the hands of these sentry robots at any time. In the open space, although his body's defense has been greatly improved after turning into diamond, he still cannot withstand the attack of the sentry robot, which is more than 10 times his size. After another collision, White Queen finally couldn't hold on anymore, and her body was directly shaken by huge amounts of force and flew backwards. At the same time, the 2 sentry robots behind her transformed their right hands into huge amounts of cone-shaped weapons. He poked the White Queen's body. At this time, the White Queen in the air also noticed the situation behind. But at this time, her body was completely numb from the successive collisions with the robots. There was no way to control his body flying backwards. It's over. At this moment, this thought flashed through White Queen's mind. Her most powerful ability is not inferior to Professor X's telepathy ability, but unfortunately, this ability is of no use to these robots. And her ability to become a diamond was also copied, making it impossible for her to defeat the robot. Simply, she gave up and closed her eyes. But 5 or 6 seconds passed, and there was no pain in the body. Slowly open your eyes. Suddenly, he saw a figure wearing black armor standing next to him. The arm that the sentry robot poked was held in the hand of the man in front of him, and it remained motionless no matter how hard the robot applied force. Shumo's hands holding the sharp awl closed together forcefully. The 2 sentry robots, which had transformed into diamond forms, collided violently and turned into pieces. Then Shumo's figure kept flashing in the open space. Less than half a minute. The dozen or so sentry robots in the clearing had been shattered into pieces. Saw this scene. White Queen's eyes lit up. These sentry robots that have forced themselves into a desperate situation are like children in the opponent's hands, showing no resistance at all. I am saved. Feeling relieved, White Queen's diamond-shaped skin returned to normal thanks to her perseverance. The body sank suddenly. It was only then that she realized that she was floating in midair. After his body returned to normal, he fell hard to the ground. Pulling at the wound on her shoulder, she let out a low cry of pain. After finishing handling the robot, Shumo turned around, looked at the White Queen who was gritting her teeth and screaming in pain, and put away the helmet. This was not what he meant to do. Originally, his mental psychokinesis had no problem controlling her diamond body, but after she exited the diamond transformation, the mental psychokinesis was unable to hold her and passed directly through her body. The White Queen showed a surprised look on her face when she saw Shumo's appearance. She didn't expect that the person who could completely torture these sentry robots would be such a young man in his 20s. He forced himself to sit up from the ground. She looked at Shumomo and said seriously, "Thanks. Thank you is more than just words. Can you still stand up?" After finishing speaking, Shumo watched the other party try hard to support himself with his arms, but failed both times. Shumo sighed. He stepped forward, picked up the White Queen from the ground, and flew away into the distance. New York, Brooklyn, in a sea view villa owned by Shumo. Aha! As the White Queen groaned, the bullet left in her shoulder flew out from the wound. Tear off the clothes from the wound. Shumo opened the medicine box and took out the medicine and bandages. I don't think it needs to be that troublesome. As she spoke, the White Queen took off her top, leaving only her underwear. Isn't this more convenient? Shumo's face was stunned. After taking a deep look for a few times, he spread his hands. As long as you're happy. The White Queen opposite saw Shumo's expression and a smile appeared on her face. After bandaging the other party, Shumo stood opposite her. Luckily, the internal organs were not injured, but I need to rest for a while. White Queen lay on the sofa in a state of exhaustion, tilting her head and looking at Shumo opposite her. You seem to know me. As a mutant with telepathic abilities, it can be said that her grasp of micro-expressions is better than those of senior psychologists. Although she was unable to sense the other person's thoughts from beginning to end. But just from the way the other person looked at her, she concluded that the other person must know her. Shumo did not answer, but waved gently. A bottle of whiskey and 2 wine glasses flew out from the wine cabinet on the side. He reached out to take it and poured a glass for each of them. It's not important. The reason why I saved you is because you were of some use to me. It's that simple. After hearing this, White Queen's expression did not change much. As the person who was once second only to Black Emperor Shao in Hellfire, she naturally understood that it was impossible for the other party to risk his life to save her for no reason. Being able to save her means that she is worthy of taking action. At this time, the pain in the wound on her shoulder had subsided after applying medicine. He stood up from the sofa and walked to Shumo. It works. The White Queen's hand gently brushed Shumo's face, revealing a charming smile on his face. Is it as useful as I thought it would be? Half an hour later. After instructing the White Queen to recuperate in the villa, Shumo's figure rose from the ground. White Queen stood in front of the window of the villa, wiped the corners of her mouth, and looked at Shumo disappearing into the sky. When she was in the jungle before, her telepathic ability could not sense the other person's presence. And just now she tried it twice again, and the results were the same as before. It's not the same kind as Professor. Shumo was completely unable to feel the other person's presence. In comparison, his ability is even more terrifying than Professor X's. And judging from the recent contact, he not only has an extremely powerful physique, but also has the ability to control with his mind. Among all the mutants she knows, there seems to be no one more terrifying than him. This was also the reason why she decisively chose to surrender. Shumo flew in the sky, recalling the information he had received from the White Queen. A few years ago, White Queen Emma was targeted by Bolivar Teslak's Mutant Research Corporation. After fighting several times, she also realized that it was difficult for her to compete with the opponent's sentry robot, and then she chose to live in seclusion, avoiding the pursuit of the robot. But she didn't expect that some time ago, by chance, she was targeted by these robots again. This was the scene in the jungle before. And Shumo knew that the main reason why the other party was able to stay easily was the pressure the sentry robot put on the other party. Without her own shelter, I am afraid that Emma will become a member of the Mutant Research Laboratory before long. Of course, she must be the subject of research. New York State. On a country road leading to a small town. Shumo sat in the passenger seat of an ordinary Ford car with a relaxed expression and slowly closed the document in his hand. You don't seem surprised at all. Hill, who was driving the car, looked at Shumo, who looked normal, and asked in confusion. God knows how shocked she was after seeing what was recorded in this document. This is the legendary vampire. After Shumo heard this, he looked at Hill beside him with a smile. Believe me, among the enemies you will encounter in the future, this thing is not even ranked in the top 10 in terms of scariness. The information in his hand contains records about vampires. And the two of them appearing here together is of course Shumo fulfilling his promise and helping Shield. Since half a year ago, tourists began to disappear one after another in a small town in New York State. So far, hundreds of tourists have disappeared. Shield once sent many agents here to investigate, but the final result was that they all disappeared mysteriously like those tourists. Even an 8th-level agent dispatched last week also lost contact. In desperation, Nick Fury could only use up the only chance Shumo had promised to take action. After Shumo got the news, he set off with Hill. The agent who folded here did not gain anything at all. There was once an agent who sent the last message before disappearing. The message contained only 3 words, vampire. Shumo knew very well. The vampires in the Marvel world can only be regarded as a bunch of weaklings. There are not only 2 major weaknesses, fear of sunlight and silverware. Even the combat power is only slightly stronger than ordinary people. Even if an ordinary person is equipped with a long silver knife, he may be able to kill several empty-handed vampires with all his strength. This kind of combat power can only be regarded as cannon fodder in the Marvel world where superheroes are everywhere. According to Shumo's current strength, if he just stood here and let them bite him, they might not be able to hurt him at all despite all their efforts. On the contrary, to him, these vampires represent a lot of points. If we can find the other party's lair and clean them, I'm afraid we can gain a lot. Soon, the car stopped in front of a hotel in a small town called Sarah. The small town of Sarah is located in northeastern New York State. Because of its ancient castle and hundreds of ancient buildings, it has become a famous tourist destination. With the number of tourists increasing year by year, it has gradually developed to this day and has become a prosperous town with a permanent population of nearly hundreds of thousands. Shumo walked out of the car, took off his sunglasses, and looked at the conical castles in the distance and the chronological buildings in the castle area, with a smile on his face. The scenery is not bad, it is indeed a suitable place for traveling. Hill got out of the car, then took out 2 slender boxes from the trunk with great effort, glanced at Shumo, and spoke wordlessly. Do you really think we are here for a trip? Although she is a well-trained 9th-level agent, she still feels a little uneasy when facing the legendary vampire. It is completely impossible to be as relaxed and casual as Shumo, just like traveling. When Shumo heard this, he gave the other party a reassuring look. Then he looked at the slightly shabby hotel in front of him. Your funds are already so tight. Although it's not as good as staying in a star hotel, it's too perfunctory. Shumo reached out and pushed open the door, which had some mottled paint on it, and turned to look at Hill, who was carrying 2 boxes behind him. Why don't you consider changing your boss? I can double your salary. Although Hill is just an ordinary person, his ability in management and logistics is almost top-notch, and he is not disadvantaged by his subordinates. Okay, if you have this idea, I will contact you as soon as possible. Listening to the other party's perfunctory words, Shumo didn't take it seriously. The 2 came to the counter. Boss, open a room. After a while, the 2 of them entered a room on the 2nd floor carrying their things. Shield agents disappear here one after another. Obviously the other party is already very vigilant. The 2 of them came here, naturally, not with their real identities, but pretending to be a traveling couple. Naturally, only one room was opened. Hill placed the 2 boxes in his hands on the bed in the room. Enter the password on the keypad on the box. See. After a burst of pressure relief, the box slowly opened. Shumo looked into the box. It didn't take a guess to know that the box should contain some weapons for dealing with vampires. Although I don't know if it is useful, weapons can always bring people some sense of security. After Hill finished speaking, he handed the box in his hand to Shumo. After Shumo took it, he looked at the pile of weapons inside. The first is a silver long knife. It seemed to be made of some kind of alloy doped with silver. Shumo waved lightly, and a corner of the wooden bedside slowly slid down, and the cut surface was very smooth. I have to say that in terms of weapons and equipment, S.H.I.E.L.D. still has something to offer. With a slight movement in his hand, the long knife disappeared from his hand, and then he continued to look into the box. Hill's eyes widened when he saw this scene. Then he stepped forward and grabbed Shumo's right hand that had just held the knife. Then he looked around for a few times and found no trace of the long knife. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Could it be that my eyesight is dazzled? Where are the things? Shumo moved his right hand slightly. The long knife suddenly appeared in his hand, and then disappeared again. You can understand it is some kind of special ability. Seeing Shumo perform again, Hill finally came to his senses. Oh my god, this is so amazing. Could it be that you are a mutant? Well, you can understand that. Shumo, who was too lazy to explain to the other party, responded casually. Then his eyes fell on the box in front of him again. In addition to the long knife, there are 3 other things in the box. A specially made pistol that fires silver bullets and comes with hundreds of bullets. Several grenades emitting lavender light, and what looked like spray-type sunscreen. The pistol and bullets were put away without any surprise, and the grenade was easily guessed. It should be a special grenade that can release ultraviolet rays. But Shumo couldn't understand the last bottle of something that looked like sunscreen spray. Turning to look at Hill aside. What is this? Hill, who had already recovered, quickly opened his mouth to explain. This is a skin care spray that contains silver elements. According to them, spraying this spray on your body will make vampires lose any interest in you. Then what's the difference between this and garlic water? After Hill heard this, he looked stunned. After thinking for a moment, he said, the only difference may be that after spraying this thing, ordinary people will not treat you as an alien. Give all the equipment to Shumo. Hill went to search for the traces left by the previous agent, leaving Shumo alone in the hotel. After all, it is their agent's job to investigate matters. But Shumo only provided military assistance. After the other party left, Shumo had nothing to do, so he walked out of the hotel and walked around the town. It's just May. It's the peak tourist season. Tourists carrying bags can be seen everywhere on the streets of the town. It seems that the government suppressed the disappearance of tourists. Shumo sighed. Otherwise, after receiving information about a large number of missing people, there would be no way there would be so many tourists. Wrong. He suddenly realized that if there were no people behind the scenes to interfere with it, the government would probably not choose to suppress the news. After all, there are hundreds of people. It is difficult enough just to block the mouths of these family members. Why would the government do such a thankless thing? In this case, it is likely that senior government officials are involved. After all, for those high-ranking officials, the temptation of eternal life is indeed attractive enough. Although it has the side effect of not being able to live in the sun, if you choose between death and simply not being able to see the light, no one will care about this small disadvantage anymore. Shumo was just like an ordinary tourist, wandering aimlessly in the town. A few hours later, the sky had gradually darkened, and he came to the area where the ancient buildings were located. This area is very large. It occupies almost half of the entire town. Several ancient castles located in the center of the ancient building complex are private areas and are not open to the public. Shumo was stopped as soon as he walked onto a road leading to the castle. Seeing this, he didn't insist anymore, but turned around and left. After walking to where the guards were looking, a set of armor suddenly appeared on him, covering his whole body. Then he moved and flew towards the castle. If we say that in this small town, the things most easily associated with vampires are the castles in front of us. After all, judging from the movies he has watched, vampires all live in castles. But the facts seemed to disappoint him. Checked out several castles in succession. Except for a few daily maintenance staff, no vampires with unusually pale faces were found inside. Because it was completely dark now, he had no way to confirm whether these people were vampires based on their appearance alone. He could only test them one by one. The test method is also very simple. Spray the bottle of liquid mixed with silver particles that Hill gave him to them. If there were vampires, they would obviously not remain indifferent. But the result is obvious, these people are really just ordinary people. Until his figure approached an ancient castle located in the center, a shout came from the room on the top floor of the castle. There's a situation. Shumo looked happy. Then the figure flashed and floated outside the window of the room where the shouting came from. Looking into the room, the one who screamed was a girl tied to a chair. In front of the girl stood an old man whose hair was half gray. At this time, the old man's hands were pulling the girl's clothes. Seeing that the girl's clothes had been torn off, only a set of white lace underwear was left. If you saw this scene in the movie, if someone jumped out to save the beauty at this critical moment, Shumo would probably greet this hero's ancestors for 18 generations. But in this reality, Shumo still chose to take action. A pistol filled with silver bullets appeared in his hand, pointed at the old man in the room, and he directly pulled the trigger. Bang! After a gunshot, a bloody hole appeared on the old man's head, and he slowly fell to the ground. Kill the villain, points plus 80. Not a vampire. Looking at the blood flowing out of the other party's wound, Shumo sighed in disappointment. With a movement of his body, Shumo entered the room through the open window. With a slight wave of his hand, a flying knife flew out and cut the rope on the girl's body. In the process of cutting the rope, the flying knife accidentally touched the girl's skin. The girl seemed oblivious to this. It seems I'm too sensitive. When Shumo saw this, he thought to himself, put on your clothes and I'll see you off. Then he stood up and stood in front of the window, looking at the scenery outside. Since he didn't meet any vampires, he planned to leave as soon as possible. Hill should be going back soon at this time. I wonder if she has gained anything there. The moment the tied girl saw the flying knife, a strange color flashed in her eyes. When she heard that the other party was about to send her away, the girl did not put on her clothes in a hurry, but walked to Shumo. Are you a mutant? Looking at the girl standing in front of him, Shumo said coldly. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Seeing that Shumo did not deny it, the girl grabbed his arm with both hands and said hurriedly, please, save my sister. As long as you can rescue my sister, I will agree to any conditions you have. After Shumo heard this, he was unmoved. I can send you to the police station later. You should ask them for help in this matter. Do good deeds to save people. That's what police officers are supposed to do. It doesn't matter if he saves people casually like this. But he has no interest in being a superhero. Hearing Shumo's words of rejection, tears flowed from the girl's eyes. I have already reported it to the police, but these police did nothing at all. Instead, they used it as a threat. As she spoke, her eyes fell on the dead old man beside her. This man is the chief of the police station. Hearing the girl's explanation, Shumo was speechless. As expected of a country of freedom, this director's operations are a bit shabby. Not only the criminals had to be shot several times, but also those who came to call the police. Who took your sister away? Those are not people, but monsters like vampires. After hearing her words, Shumo's expression changed. You mean she was taken by a vampire? Hearing this, the girl's eyes rekindled hope and she quickly wiped away her tears. I don't know if those monsters are vampires, but they look very similar to the vampires in the movie. Half an hour later, Shumo took the girl directly back to the hotel where they were staying. At the door, I happened to meet Hill, who was coming back from outside. Seeing Hill's doubtful eyes fall on the girl behind him. Go back to your room and talk. Shumo explained and took the lead to walk upstairs. After returning to the room, Hill first took out a small instrument, checked the room, and confirmed that there was no eavesdropping equipment in the room before asking. Shumo explained to Hill what happened before. Where was your sister captured by those monsters? Hill turned to the girl. It was in a pub called the Irish Pub. As the Irish Pub in the east part of town. The girl was stunned when she heard this, and then nodded quickly. Hill saw Shumo's confused look and explained. I found some information left by the previous agent on the street today. It turns out that these people lost contact in this area. Etc. Shumo looked at Hill with confusion. Don't you agents know how to send messages or make phone calls, and yet you still use such a primitive way of transmitting information? Hill spread his hands. I'm not sure. The fact is that after those agents came here, they quickly lost contact. Only one agent ever sent a message, and that was the message related to vampires. Irish pub, located on a street in the east area of the town. The entire street is lined with all kinds of neon lights. Women in scantily clad clothes sit under the neon lights, waiting for customers to come. From time to time, someone would come up to ask about the price, and then drag the women into the back room. As Shumo walked, he looked at the scenery on both sides with great interest. "What, are you interested?" Seeing him looking around, Hill teased. "Are you interested in Shield reimbursing me?" For a moment, Hill was speechless. But she also knew that both parties were just joking. How could a rich man with a net worth of hundreds of billions fall in love with these ordinary things? Soon, the two came to the door of the Irish pub. It looks like a shabby bar from the outside, but once inside, it's a completely different place. The entire bar is underground. After entering the bar, there were not many people inside. What to do next? Looking at the huge amounts of hundreds of people walking around in the bar, coupled with the dim lights, there is no way to distinguish vampires from ordinary people. Well, hearing Shumo's inquiry, Hill was speechless for a moment. You can't just come up and ask one by one. Seeing the other party's expression, Shumo sighed. Forget it, I'd better do it. After saying that, Shumo put his hand into his pocket, and when he came out, there was a spherical object in his hand. It's the UV grenade in the previous box. Without any hesitation, he pressed the button on the grenade and threw it into the air in the center of the bar. Close your eyes. After shouting at Hill, Shumo turned his head away from the direction of the grenade. Hill was shocked when he saw Shumo's actions. In this dim environment, not to mention vampires, even ordinary people would become blind within half a month if they were exposed to this, etc. But when her voice came out, the grenade had already been thrown away by Shumo. Seeing this, Hill imitated Shumo without hesitation. Turn around and close your eyes. Bang! A moderate explosion came from the direction of the grenade. Then a violent bright light shot out from the location of the explosion. In an instant, the entire dark bar was illuminated as bright as day. Ah! Cries came from all directions. Kill the villain, points plus 160. Kill the villain, points plus 210. More than a dozen reminders appeared in Shumo's mind. The points you get from killing vampires are very generous. Shumo's eyes lit up. Even under certain circumstances, these vampires are easier to kill than ordinary people. But the points are several times that of ordinary humans. When Hill opened his eyes, he immediately saw that almost everyone in the entire bar fell to the ground, covering their eyes and screaming. Shumo looked at Hill's gaze and shrugged. Do you have a better way? But, the scope of this accidental injury is too large. Hill was speechless. Don't worry, these people will recover soon, and they were accidentally injured during counter-terrorism. Because of this, they can get a long period of paid leave. In total, there is no loss. Maybe they will thank me for it. After speaking, Shumo did not wait for the other party's answer, but rushed in one direction. Relying on psychokinesis, the scene around him just appeared clearly in his mind. In the explosion of the grenade, a dozen vampires hidden in the crowd were turned into ashes. Only the two vampires standing at the entrance of a corridor in the distance escaped because they ducked into the corridor in time. However, they are also burned by UV rays. At this time, with the help of a vampire who was not injured because he was in the corridor, he fled deeper into the corridor. After hearing Shumo's explanation, Hill showed a look of helplessness on his face. Then he shook his head and chased after the opponent's back. In the corridor, the two vampires, whose skin was burned, screamed in pain from time to time while running away. White smoke was rising from the burned areas of the skin. To recover from their injuries, they need enough blood. Although the hall is full of living humans, they are not stupid. Being able to take out ultraviolet grenades, a device specifically aimed at vampires, is obviously aimed at them. If they dare to enter the hall again, they may be turned into ashes like their companions in the hall before they can drink blood to recover from their injuries. While running, the three of them also heard the unhurried footsteps coming from behind. As the footsteps get closer, at the end of the corridor, Shumo's figure appeared. Looking at Shumo, who appeared behind the three of them almost instantly, the vampire who was not injured pushed the other two out. Go quickly, I'll stop him. After saying that, the woman turned to look at Shumo, opened her mouth and showed two sharp teeth, and roared at him. Come on, Kid, I'm going to suck every drop of blood from your body. After saying that, the woman rushed towards Shumo. Just as he jumped in front of Shumo, he waved his right hand lightly a few times. Ah! The female vampire let out a scream. He suddenly fell in front of Shumo, his arms and legs already bent into an incredible shape. The female vampire who fell to the ground still opened her mouth tenaciously and roared at Shumo. That being said, you are very good at sucking. As he said that, the pistol filled with silver bullets appeared in Shumo's hand, and he stuffed it directly into the female vampire's roaring mouth. Seeing the opponent's arm slowly returning to its normal shape, he directly pressed the trigger. Bang! After a gunshot, the female vampire turned into ashes and dissipated. Kill the villain, points plus 180. Shumo put away the pistol. You are really good at it. I can only hold it for 3 seconds with my pistol. After dealing with the opponent, he continued to chase the other two. Judging from the situation of the fight just now, my guess was correct. These vampires are indeed a bunch of weaklings. Just now, I only used less than 100% of my strength, and the other party was unable to resist. When the two injured vampires heard the screams and gunshots coming from behind, the look of fear on their faces became even stronger. At the same time, footsteps sounded in the corridor again. The sound seemed to step on their hearts, making them almost breathless. After all, the vampire who had just blocked the opponent didn't even hold on for half a minute before he was eliminated by the opponent. If the two of them combined, they are probably not much stronger than the opponent. In panic, the two of them ran to the end of the corridor with all their strength, regardless of the pain in their bodies, and rushed into the elevator. Both hands were pressing the door close button frantically. Looking at the slowly closing elevator door, the two of them let out a sigh of relief at the same time. Seeing that the last gap in the elevator door had disappeared, and the elevator was about to start, the door opening button on the side suddenly lit up. The closed elevator doors reopened. Wardfa. The two people's hearts dropped again. He hurriedly pressed the door close button again. As the door gradually closed, the door open button lit up again. Fake. The two of them were already on the verge of collapse. If I were allowed to escape, I would definitely find the elevator installer and tear him into pieces. I'm afraid you won't have this chance. Shumo's ghostly figure appeared outside the elevator door. Chapter 31. Shumo stepped into the elevator. The desire to survive prompted the two vampires to muster up the courage to pounce. However, after a few punches, the two of them recognized the reality and became honest. Lifting a vampire from the ground. Tell me where your lair is. You. Poof. Shumo pulled out the long knife from the opponent's chest and saw that the opponent turned into ashes under his gaze. Then he lifted the other one up. I said. Our base is underneath this bar. Before Shumo could speak, the vampire hurriedly spoke. Then he pressed the buttons on the elevator floor several times regularly. A hole opened under the buttons, and a button marking the second floor slipped out. Coincidentally, Hill also caught up from behind at this time. What the other party said fell into her ears. I seem to be a little late. No, you came just in time. After saying that, Shumo inserted the knife in his hand into the vampire's chest. After pressing the new button that appears in the elevator, there was a strong feeling of weightlessness, and the elevator descended for half a minute. This also convinced the two of them that the so-called negative second floor was at least hundreds of meters away from the negative first floor. Bite. As the elevator door opened, there was a dark room outside. There are hundreds of figures standing in the file-sized hall of several hundred square meters. Among these people were several tied-up girls. The girls' wrists were cut open. Streams of blood flowed from their wrists. As if they were having a part, the vampires around him took turns to come forward. Several girls had died due to excessive blood loss. Hill stared at the scene in front of her that made her visibly uncomfortable. Surprisingly, perhaps because this place was too secretive, these people were unprepared and indifferent to the arrival of the two. It wasn't until half a minute later that the two vampires near the elevator noticed the two people walking out of the elevator. After seeing the appearance of the two people, the eyes of the two vampires, a man and a woman, lit up at the same time. Then he rushed towards the two of them. Seeing this scene, Hill finally couldn't help it. He took out his pistol from his pocket and shot the two vampires with 2 casual shots. Huge amounts of gunfire echoed through the underground space. All the vampires in the hall paused and turned to look in the direction of the two of them. Looking at Agent Hill holding a gun, these vampires immediately reacted. He roared angrily and rushed towards this side. Shumo, who was shocked by this big scene, also reacted. Block Hill behind you. Shumo looked at the figures rushing over one after another, howling in anger. A bunch of scum. Your dark behavior must be exposed. As he spoke, an ultraviolet grenade appeared in his hand and he threw it casually. After a while, dazzling light filled the entire space. Exposure plus 1000. Almost instantly, these vampires are burned to ashes by the light. When the light disappeared, almost all the vampires in the entire space disappeared. Only a few who reacted quickly and hid behind the support pillars survived. Hill let out a sigh of relief. After this mission is over, I think I need to receive some psychological treatment. Maybe you need to vent more. After saying that, Shumo handed the silver knife to the other party. Hill reached out and took it. He rushed directly towards the surviving vampires. Although these vampires survived, the strong light in the room still burned their skin. At this time, they were in Hill's hands and had almost no power to resist. In less than 5 minutes, all these vampires were reduced to ashes. Shumo took the lead and walked towards the passage across the hall. Walk along the passage to the end and there is another elevator. The protection here is quite tight. When there was no one left alive this time, Shumo took out his sword made of adamantium and slashed the elevator door to pieces with 3 or 2 strokes. You wait here, I'll go down and check the situation first. After saying that, Shumo jumped up and jumped directly from the dark elevator shaft. Landing gently on the top of the elevator, Shumo made a hole under his feet and fell into the elevator. After exiting the elevator, there is a corridor less than 10 meters long. At the end of the corridor is a metal gate. Just as he walked to the door slowly opened automatically, revealing the scene behind the door. In a dark hall, there were a circle of pale vampires sitting around them. On the altar in the middle of these vampires, a girl of 17 or 18 years old was tied up. The girl's appearance is exactly the same as that of the girl who was rescued from the castle before. Shumo instantly guessed that this should be the girl's sister. Judging from the circle of vampires sitting around, they seemed to be performing some kind of ritual. There was no hesitation. Shumo changed his hand to the special pistol, raised the muzzle and fired in bursts. Although I don't know what the other party is doing, as an enemy, as long as the other party wants to do something, I only need to stop the other party without thinking, and it must be right. But obviously, these vampires should have a certain status in the vampire community. The strength is not comparable to those of vampires outside. After a flexible jump, they dodged the silver bullets fired at them. Then the group of vampires showed their sharp teeth and rushed towards Shumo. Shumo remained unmoved. He stretched out his fingers on his right hand and flicked them in the air. The bullets that the vampire had dodged drew an arc, turned around, and shot in their direction again. And the speed is at least doubled compared to before. The unsuspecting vampires were shot through by bullets in an instant and turned into ashes. Just as Shumo was about to step onto the high platform, his eyes paused. A flying knife flew out of his hand and cut the rope on the girl's body. Then the girl was dragged away from the high platform by her clothes. The unconscious girl also woke up after all this tossing. She looked at Shumo who was holding her in confusion. Who are you? Seeing that the other party seemed fine, Shumo put him down. I was entrusted by your sister to save you. After the girl heard this, her face showed confusion. Elder sister. My parents only have one daughter, me. Where can I get a sister? Hearing this, Shumo looked stunned, and then his expression changed. Oops. As he spoke, he mentioned that he was going to fly outside. But it's still a little too late. The surrounding walls were instantly wrapped in a black energy. A woman who looked the same as the girl next to him slowly landed from the sky. It's too late to leave now. As the woman slowly landed, an astonishing change took place in her appearance. By the time she landed not far in front of the two of them, she had transformed into a middle-aged woman who looked to be in her 50s and was wearing a black robe. Who are you anyway? Shumo looked at the other party cautiously. Judging from the situation, the other party seems to be a witch. At present, what he is least willing to face is these mysterious opponents. These people have all kinds of strange methods, and it is very likely that there will be situations that they cannot handle. The woman opposite saw Shumo's expression and a smile appeared on her face. Me, I've been alive for so long that I almost forgot my original name. Let me think about it. There was a trace of memory on the witch's face. After a moment, she suddenly came back to her senses and spoke excitedly. Oh, I remembered, you can call me Agatha. Agatha. Shumo's expression changed. He is naturally no stranger to Agatha, who can be considered the most powerful black magician in the Marvel world. Later, the Chaos Force tried to capture Wanda. Although it failed in the end, it cannot deny the strength of the other party's black magic. Were all the people who disappeared in this town caused by you? Of course not, to be precise, it was these lowly vampires who did it. Agatha shook her head. My only goal is this little girl. But now, she is of no use to me, because there is a more suitable candidate than her. After saying that, Agatha's eyes fell on Shumo, and then she took action without warning. A ball of black energy shot out of her hand and shot towards Shumo. Shumo flashed and dodged to the side. At the same time, several flying knives flew out of his body. The moment he dodged, a purple space gate appeared in his path. Shumo had no time to dodge and fell directly into the space door. Unexpectedly, the space door leads to the center of the altar just a few meters away. Not good. Shumo's expression changed and he immediately flew towards the outside of the altar. But Agatha, who had been prepared for a long time, obviously couldn't let him get his wish. A transparent energy barrier appeared around the altar, covering him and the altar. Shumo clenched his fist with all his strength and struck towards the barrier. After a violent shock, a spiderweb-like crack appeared on the barrier. However, the cracks were repaired in an instant. Seeing this scene, Agatha's face was not surprised but happy. Sure enough, this body not only has a long lifespan, but is also as strong as the Hulk. As long as you occupy this body, not only will you not have to worry about the aging of your body for hundreds of years to come, but you will also be able to make up for the weakness of the wizard's body. Okay, haha. A maniacal laugh burst from Agatha's mouth. When Shumo heard what the other party said, he immediately understood. Wizards and mages are the same. Although they are powerful, they have various methods. But lifespan doesn't change much. Even those as powerful as the Supreme Mage Ancient One need to draw power from the Dark Dimension to extend their lifespan. As a wizard, Agatha is no exception. Judging from what she said, it was obvious that the other party could not extend his life by drawing power from the Dark Dimension like the Ancient One Mage, but instead adopted another method to extend his life. That's the way to seize the body, etc. Shumo suddenly realized. You mean, you, a woman, want to take away my man? Agatha's laughter stopped. Don't worry, after my soul enters your body, I can reshape your body into mine. You a woman want to enter a man's body. It is simply the opposite of Tiangong. The most unbearable thing is that the other party wants to transform his body into hers. At this time, Agatha had already begun to seize the body. The deep purple lines on the altar at Shumo's feet gradually lit up, and Agatha slowly floated directly above the altar, uttering a series of difficult to understand spells. Seeing this scene, Shumo no longer held back. Just now he was able to crack the shield with just his physical strength. With the blessing of psychokinesis, it is not difficult to break the shield. At that moment, a layer of battle armor was put on his arms. Shumo's body rose into the sky, and his fist with hundreds of tons of force hit the top of the protective shield. It sounded like a bubble bursting. The protective shield didn't even last for half a second before it turned into purple energy and dissipated. Shumo rushed toward Agatha in the air with undiminished momentum. Agatha, who was reciting a spell, obviously did not expect this scene to happen. There was a look of panic on her face, and she was about to move aside as soon as her body moved. But compared to Shumo, the speed is really too slow. Almost instantly, Shumo's fist was about to hit Agatha. At the critical moment, dark purple energy overflowed from Agatha's body, forming a protective shield around her body again. But the protective shield shattered almost instantly under Agatha's hopeful gaze. Shumo's fist hit her without any resistance. No! Amidst a scream, Agatha's old body exploded into a mist of blood. Shumo didn't have time to relax. A black shadow rushed out of the blood mist. It sank directly into Shumo's eyebrows. Where Agatha's body was originally, a book exuding black energy floated slowly. It is obviously the dark book controlled by Agatha. Less than 5 seconds, the dark god book also turned into a stream of light, following Agatha and sinking into Shumo's eyebrows. The moment Agatha's soul entered Shumo's body, Shumo's eyes became dull. After losing control of his body, he fell from the sky. Fortunately, with his current physical fitness, let alone such a height of only 10 meters. Even from a height of hundreds of meters, falling would not cause much harm to him. After Agatha's body was destroyed, the dark energy shrouding the entire hall gradually dissipated. Hill's figure opened the door and rushed in. Looking at Shumo lying on the ground, Hill quickly stepped forward and helped him up. The girl hiding aside also hurriedly stepped forward to help. "What's going on?" Extending his hand to touch Shumo's breath, Hill turned to ask the girl beside him. The girl recounted what happened in the hall before. After listening, Hill's expression changed. The witch took the body. From the girl's retelling, she instantly understood the current situation. What to do, what to do? Hill, who could remain calm no matter how vicious the gangsters were, suddenly became a little flustered. Deal with these mysterious things. She had no experience to draw from. It doesn't matter if you destroy my body, there's nothing you can do to stop it. Agatha's soul originally rushed into Shumo's sea of consciousness with a shout of triumph. However, when she saw the star tower in the middle of the sea of consciousness, which seemed to be in another space, her voice stopped abruptly. The aura emanating from the star tower made the hairs on her body explode. His eyes carefully looked at the star tower and Shumo standing under the star tower. "Boy, you really surprised me. I didn't expect you to have such a treasure in your body." Having said this, Agatha stretched out her hand and waved it gently. The Book of Darkness appeared in her palm. However, everything is in vain, nothing can resist me. With the dark book in hand, Agatha regained her confidence. Shumo took a look at the pure black book exuding black energy in the other person's hand. He knew very well that this was just a copy of the Dark God book, but the content was basically the same as what was originally recorded. Sometimes, being too conceited is not a good thing. I hope you can still be so tough talking later. After Agatha finished speaking, the dark book in her hand emitted a stream of pure dark energy, which turned into tentacles and wrapped around Shumo's body. Look at each other with pity in your eyes. Be obedient and give your soul. She knows the power of the dark book better than anyone else. It not only records all the black magic created by Sithorn, but also after a long period of time, coupled with long-term contact with many black magicians, the Dark God Book has turned into a powerful treasure. With the blessing of the Dark Book, her black magic release speed and power can be doubled. The moment the Divine Book releases dark energy, the star tower suspended above Shumo's head seemed to be disturbed. The 9th level vortex rotating outside the tower shook slightly. A strange wave of energy seemed to be transmitted from another space and swept towards the location of Agatha and the Dark God Book. The tentacles that stretched out from the Dark Book disappeared as if they were annihilated the moment they came into contact with this energy. Agatha's expression changed when she saw this. With his hands waving, more dark energy overflowed from the Divine Book and turned into tentacles to resist the energy released by the vortex. But these tentacles can't slow down the speed of energy at all. Almost in the blink of an eye, the energy arrived in front of Agatha. No! In a miserable cry, Agatha's soul disappeared directly into Shumo's sea of consciousness like those tentacles. After the energy swept away, only the Dark Book of Darkness was left floating slowly. Seeing the Dark Divine Book left in place, Shumo's eyes lit up. Shumo was not surprised that the Star Tower could crush the opponent. No matter how you say it, it is at least a God King level weapon. How could even a witch not be able to resist it? He took 2 steps forward, stretched out his hand, and was about to put away the Book of Darkness. Although the frontal combat effectiveness of the devouring system is extremely strong, it is still somewhat weak in the early stages of facing these magical enemies. If he can control the Dark God Book, he will undoubtedly be able to make up for his shortcomings in this area. This is the Divine Book opposite to the Book of the Holy Trinity Wyshan Emperor. It can be said to be the existence at the top of magic in this world. However, just when Shumo was about to touch the Dark Divine Book, the star tower at the center of the consciousness sea trembled, and the dark divine book turned into a stream of light and sank into the star tower, as if it had received some kind of summons. The moment the dark god book sank into the star tower, in some dark dimension, Sithorn, the god of the underworld, who was sleeping so huge that he couldn't see the edge, suddenly opened his eyes. My power. At this moment, he felt that the power in his body was being rapidly withdrawn. The speed was so fast that in less than 2 breaths, 1/10 of the power in his body had been drained away. Feel it carefully. Is this a believer borrowing my power through black magic? As the god of Hades, the creator of black magic, all those who use black magic need to borrow his power in order to successfully release it. Of course, as a price, after using his power, it will be gradually eroded by his power. Until the end, his soul was completely devoured by him. And the soul is the source of the evolution of their power. Wrong. Sithorn shot down the possibility almost instantly. Even if millions of the most powerful black magicians release magic at the same time, the consumption rate cannot reach this level. No time to think. Sithorn quickly cast a spell, intending to block the leakage of power within his body. After all, according to the speed of this energy extraction, he would not be able to hold on for even half a minute before he would be drained directly. When the time comes, he, the god of Hades, will probably become a laughingstock in the Mephisto world if he dies because he borrowed the power of believers and was drained of his energy. For a moment, Sithorn's expression suddenly changed. No, it's impossible. A crazy roar came from his mouth. He just tried it and found that no matter how he cut off the connection with the other party, the speed of the loss of dark energy in his body did not change at all. This was the first time this happened, causing Sithorn's brain to shut down for a moment. The black magic he created borrowed his magical energy. Of course it is up to him to decide whether to borrow or not. But what is the situation now? Even without his permission, energy was pouring out crazily. This is not borrowing, this is robbery. Sithorn howled angrily. However, as one of the 4 oldest ancient gods, Sithorn calmed down almost instantly. The top priority now is to save his own life first. Think of this. Sithorn's huge body composed of dark energy was surrounded by a huge purple magic circle. The endless dark energy around him poured into his body like a tide, making up for the energy he consumed. His current location is the underworld he created after countless years. This world is full of dark energy, which can be directly absorbed by him. With a crazy influx of energy. Only then can he barely maintain the flow of energy in his body and maintain it in a balanced state. After temporarily stabilizing the situation, Sithorn had time to sense towards the heavens and the world. Don't let me find you, or your soul will be burned in the flames of hell for millions of years. I don't know how much time passed. Found you. Sithorn made a sound of excitement. Then consciousness descended into Shumo's world. With his ability, he can possess the body of anyone in this world at will. After possessing him, he can exert 1% of his ability. But he didn't think that in this state, he could deal with enemies who forcibly plundered his energy. Wandage Mountain, Temple of Darkness. On the rock wall carved with complicated patterns, waves of dark energy overflowed. Finally, a black book condensed in midair, which was the original dark divine book. At the same time, a black space door slowly opened in the cave. Under the control of Sithorn, the dark book of darkness disappeared into a space door opened in front of it. In the underground space of the bar, Shumo slowly woke up. After the copy of the Dark God book was taken into the Star Tower, he tried various methods but could not take it out. In desperation, I can only give up. After all, strictly speaking, Agatha was also killed by the Star Tower, and this was also the spoils of the Star Tower. See Shumo wake up. Hill and the girl on the side were not happy but reacted with surprise. Take a few steps back to distance yourself from him. Hill even took out his pistol and pointed it at Shumo opposite. Who are you? The witch's soul had entered Shumo's body, and they were not sure whether the person standing in front of them was Shumo himself or the witch who had successfully seized the body. Don't worry, the witch has been completely eliminated. Shumo replied listlessly. Sitting back and watching the Book of Darkness slip away from his hands, he still felt somewhat depressed. How do you prove it's you? Hill didn't believe him because of these simple words, and the muzzle of the gun in his hand did not move away. Well, Faced with such a niche language, Shumo thought for a long time, and finally spread his hands helplessly. Okay, how do you need me to prove it? Hill was also stumped by this question. After thinking about it for a while, he asked, "What color was my dress when we first met?" As she spoke, she seemed to be too hot due to strenuous exercise. She casually took off her coat, wearing only a fitness suspender top underneath. Show off your proud figure without reservation. When Shumo saw this, he couldn't help but take a few more glances, of course only with admiration. At the same time, I recalled it in my mind. The development of his mental power has made his memory dozens of times that of ordinary people, almost to the extent that he never forgets his mistakes. Black. Hill nodded. I believe you for now. After saying that, he turned around and walked outside. We'd better get out of here as soon as possible before other vampires arrive. Shumo looked at the other person's back and followed him in 2 steps. You're so careless, do you believe me when I say it? He thought he needed to explain a lot, but he didn't expect Hill to believe it after simply verifying it. Hill turned to look at him. It has nothing to do with the question you answered, she explained while putting her coat back on. Just now you glanced at my chest 6 times inadvertently. I don't think witches would be interested in my figure. Hearing this, Shumo was stunned and secretly admired in his heart. You can still play like this, you are worthy of being a professional agent. However, I think Ms. Hill, you are still a little hasty. Do you need to verify it a few more times? Several people took the elevator back to the lower level of the bar. After what happened before, the bar was now empty. Just when they were about to leave, in midair next to it, a space door slowly opened. The dark divine book controlled by Sithorn flashed and disappeared into Shumo's eyebrows. Come again. Shumo only had time to utter a complaint before he closed his eyes and fainted again. Fortunately, Hill reacted quickly and supported him directly. The rescued girl helped Hill put Shumo on the seat beside him. After hesitating for a moment, she turned to look at Hill. Did he open a bookstore in his head? Hill was a little helpless when he heard this. In such a short time, a witch and 2 books had entered Shumo's mind. Maybe, in the sea of knowledge. After the Dark God book entered here, it rushed directly towards the Star Tower without any pause. The closer the distance is, the more clearly Sithorn can perceive where his power is flowing. As we get closer and closer to the Star Tower, in Sithorn's eyes, the Star Tower is getting bigger and bigger. And the distance between the 2 seems to be getting farther and farther. What the hell is this? Feeling that the dark book he controlled became smaller and smaller in front of the Star Tower, Sithorn understood that if he continued, he would probably never reach the location of the tower in front of him. He gritted his teeth hard. Sithorn controlled the Dark God book and returned towards the original path. At this time, he also clearly understood that the opponent's strength was superior to his. If he continues, this part of his consciousness will probably be lost here. Noticing that the other party wanted to escape, there was finally a strange movement on the Star Tower. A ray of light shot out from the top of the Star Tower and illuminated the dark book. No, it was as if the ice and snow were melting. Sithorn's consciousness attached to it was instantly erased. The genuine Dark God book that was left behind turned into flowing light again and submerged into the Star Tower. Shumo on the side saw this scene. I was secretly shocked. Judging from the simple appearance of the previous Dark God book, it is easy to infer that it is the genuine Dark God book. Judging from the time point, at this time, the person who can freely control the Dark Book is probably Sithorn, the god of the underworld. Is this god of hell so stingy? After reading his pirated books, you came to the door to find someone to settle the score. But what if Agatha has watched it for hundreds of years? Shumo, who couldn't figure out the key, simply ignored it and went directly to the Star Tower. No, brother, let's discuss it. The 2 books are almost the same. You can keep 1 copy for me. The pirated version is fine, I won't pick it. But the Star Tower in front of him seemed indifferent. Standing in front of the Star Tower, Shumo tried to communicate with the Star Tower. No matter what he said, it was a treasure that he recognized as his owner. He had to give his owner some face. But it turned out that he didn't have enough face, or there was no intelligence at all in the Star Tower. He kept chattering in front of the tower for a long time, but there was no response from the Star Tower. Shumo had no choice but to retreat from inside. Taj. In an ancient hall, on a circular platform in the center, hanging the most powerful magic weapon in the supreme sanctuary, the Eye of Agamotto. The moment Sithorn mobilized the Book of Darkness, the Eye of Agamotto slowly opened, and a burst of magical energy centered on it and spread out to the surroundings. Oops, Lao Wang, who was standing by, changed his expression. Before he could send a signal, a portal opened, and the figure of the Supreme Mage Ancient One walked out of it. The Ancient One who came out waved his hand lightly, and the Eye of Agamotto was automatically placed around her neck. He pinched out a seal in his hand, and a stream of information was transmitted into the mind of the Ancient One. After a while, Ancient One slowly opened his eyes. Lao Wang, who was waiting anxiously aside, finally came forward. What's going on? The Ancient One slowly placed the Eye of Agamotto back on the shelf. Just now Emperor Weishan sensed the breath of Hades in this world, and used the Eye of Agamotto to remind us. Hades. Hearing this name, a trace of emotion flashed in Lao Wang's eyes. That's Sithorn, one of the 4 ancient gods who is several times more powerful than Domu. That's right, Ancient One nodded. It's a pity that after only sensing it for a moment, the other party disappeared from the earth again. I don't know whether he left or hid. Having said this, she looked at the murals of the New York sanctuary carved on the walls of the temple. Next, I'm afraid the whole earth will be in chaos. Hades, you robber. The whole world vibrated with Sithorn's roar. Don't blame him for being angry. He took the Dark God book to the other party to discuss it, but he didn't expect that even part of his consciousness would be destroyed by the other party this time. This also caused some damage to his body. Moreover, his connection with the Dark God book has been completely severed. It wasn't until half an hour later that the entire underworld gradually calmed down. It's not that Sithorn has calmed down, but just now, the suction force in his body has doubled. Now the speed of his energy absorbing can't match the speed of the opponent's absorption. If this continues, he will soon be sucked dry by the other party. Judging from the fight just now, the dark book controlled by it has almost no resistance in the opponent's hands. Although it is only a part of the consciousness attached to it, if you think about it from another perspective, if it were facing up, it would not be able to be solved so neatly. This shows that the opponent's strength is definitely above it. Going directly to the other party to fight for your life will definitely not work. If the strength is at the same level, it is called desperate. If someone like him rushes forward, it is called delivering food. Plan for today. He can only try his best to plunder the energy in the underworld crazily. In this way, although the energy in his body is also in a state of being unable to make ends meet, it is estimated that he can last for several months. He could only pray that the other person would stop before he was sucked dry. When Shumo woke up, he found that he had been moved to the car outside. You're awake. The rescued girl on the side looked at him with joy. Shumo looked around and found that there were only 2 of them in the car. Where's Hill? Over there. The girl pointed in one direction and said. Following her gaze, Shumo realized that the bar was already surrounded by police cars. Hill was explaining something to the leading police officer. The girl seemed to be very interested in Shumo. After all, in a sense, this can be regarded as a hero saving a beauty. Through the other party's introduction, Shumo also knew her name, Gemma Simmons. He grew up in New York and is currently pursuing a PhD in chemistry at the State University of New York. This time I came to the town of Sala for tourism, but I didn't expect to encounter such a thing. Can I contact you later? Simmons asked expectantly. Seeing the expectant look in his eyes, Shumo was embarrassed to refuse and nodded immediately. Then the 2 exchanged phone calls. Sure. Just at this time, Hill opened the car door and got in. It seems that only 2 rooms are enough for tonight. Shumo ignored the other party's joke and asked. What about the rest of the fish that slipped through the net? Hill shook his head after hearing this. At present, there is no good way. It is impossible to get rid of these vampires, but after this incident, they should be more restrained in the future. Hearing this, Shumo nodded in agreement. The number of vampires in this world is so huge that it is impossible to completely clean them up. As long as a few fish slip through the net, it won't take long for them to spread again like zombies. But it seems that in the memory, the Book of Darkness contains a spell that can wipe out all vampires at once. After all, if he remembered correctly, it seemed that the origin of vampires was related to the Dark Book. This is why Agatha is able to control these vampires. It is a pity that the Dark God Book was taken into the Star Tower. Otherwise, if you learn it yourself, you can probably get a lot of points by killing all the vampires at once. Open the mall and look at the price of the Dark God Book. 50 million points. All right, it is simply impossible to collect so many points in a short period of time. Hill drove his car and parked it outside the hotel, then took out a confidentiality agreement from somewhere and handed it to Simmons. Sign this and you won't be able to mention anything about what happened this time. Simmons took the confidentiality agreement and opened it in no hurry. Instead, he asked, I don't know what organization you belong to. Are there any requirements for joining? Can I join? You want to join us? Hill obviously did not expect the other party to ask this question. That's right, I can get my PhD in chemical physics in 2 months. Simmons quickly explained. After hearing this, Hill's eyes changed. In S.H.I.E.L.D., in addition to agents like them who are combat units, various research and logistics personnel are also needed. The opponent's doctorate in the field of chemistry is indeed a scarce talent in S.H.I.E.L.D. After thinking for a moment, think about it carefully. If you really want to, come with me back to the headquarters tomorrow. Is it really possible? After Simmons heard this, he glanced at Shumo secretly, and then jumped up excitedly. But she seemed to have forgotten that she was sitting in the car at this time. After a thud sound, Simmons covered his head and plunged it down. After a night's rest, early the next morning, the three of them set off and left the town. New York, Brooklyn. White Queen is lying lazily on the lounge chair in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows on the second floor. It seems like you're doing pretty well these days. Shumo walked in from the door and joked. Hearing this voice, the White Queen turned her head. Indeed, apart from being a little boring, there is nothing wrong with it. Believe me, you will miss this kind of life very much in the next period of time. Looks like I'm going to be useful. Certainly. Shumo nodded and stepped forward. However, before that, your ability still needs to be strengthened. With a wave of his hand, several pages of paper appeared in his hand, and then he handed them to the White Queen. What is recorded above is a technique he selected from among the techniques in his mind, a technique specifically used to cultivate spiritual power, Phantom Demon. It is a secret training method belonging to the lineage of masters and illusionists. These include the God-forging technique that improves mental strength, the dream-entering technique that can create illusions, and the soul mark cultivation method. Soul Seal is the foundation of the illusionist lineage. It is also the powerful foundation of the illusionist lineage, enslaving all things. Any creature with intelligence can be enslaved by the soul mark. In Shumo's opinion, they all belong to the same lineage of spiritual power. The White Queen's telepathy is somewhat similar to the illusionist's ability, and she should be considered a gift. There's no reason why you can't practice these secret techniques. Of course, only half of the content is recorded here. But this is enough for White Queen Emma to practice for a long time. Emma took the paper from Shumo's hand doubtfully. She doesn't think that just relying on the contents of a few pages of paper can greatly improve her strength. After a few casual glances, her eyes lit up. His expression gradually became serious. As she watched more and more content, her breathing became rapid, and a blush appeared on her face due to excitement. Oh my God, this is really shocking. Are all the things recorded on this true? After reading what was recorded above, White Queen looked at Shumo with bright eyes. Of course, I have no intention of lying to you with things that I can tell are true and false just by trying them. Oh, by gauze. The excited White Queen seemed a little incoherent. Then, she directly hung her hands around Shumo's neck, looking at each other with smiling eyes. My dear, I don't quite understand some of this. Can you go to the room and discuss it? Shumo heard this and glanced at the floor-to-ceiling window on the side. I think it's great here. After Shumo gave me everything he had to teach me. Emma couldn't wait to enter the room to practice this secret technique. Shumo came to another villa less than 2 kilometers away. It is Wanda and Pietro who live here. The reason why the White Queen is placed here is also to protect Wanda and the others. Emma relies on her telepathy ability to pay attention to everything here at any time. As soon as he walked into the villa, he saw Pietro doing a frog leap with a barbell on the grass outside the villa. After nearly a month of exercise and the nourishment of ferocious beast meat, now Pietro's strength has reached more than 800 kilograms, and he is not far away from reaching the level of a quasi-warrior. Carrying more than 200 pounds of barbell, he still moves with ease. Reaching out to wipe the sweat from his face, Pietro inadvertently saw Shumo walking in. His eyes lit up, he threw the barbell on his shoulder, and came up and gave Shumo a hug. "Hey, Shu, you're finally back." Shumo smiled and patted the other party's shoulder. "It seems that you have made great progress during this period." Speaking of this, Pietro's face showed excitement. "It's incredible, it's really amazing. Do you know how strong I am now? It's over 800 and close to 900 pounds. My running speed is close to 20 meters per second. If I go to the Olympics now, I will be able to win gold medals." Seeing the other party dancing excitedly, Shumo smiled softly. No wonder the other party would go to the Olympics after awakening to the speed force. It seems like his idea is really deeply ingrained. "Calm down, Pete. You should know that according to the cultivation method I gave you, you can't even be considered a beginner now." "All right." After hearing Shumo's persuasion, Pietro gradually calmed down. "By the way, Wanda is in the back garden," Pietro said, pointing behind him. Shumo nodded. "You keep going." After speaking, he walked towards the back of the villa. When she entered the back garden, Wanda was carefully pruning the flower branches with a small pair of scissors. Shumo walked behind her without even noticing. It wasn't until he put his arms around the other person's waist that Wanda was suddenly startled. When the scissors in his hand almost hit the person behind him, he noticed that the person behind him was Shumo. With a sigh of relief, Wanda put down the hand holding the scissors. "If you do this next time, I can't guarantee whether the scissors in your hand will get stuck." Shumo didn't take it seriously. Even if the opponent's scissors were really stuck, it would not be able to hurt him. With a gentle wave of his right hand, a bouquet of roses appeared in Shumo's hand. "Wow." Wanda took the bouquet that suddenly appeared in the other person's hand, with a surprised smile on her face. "Is this magic?" "Certainly," Shumodian admitted shamelessly. Then he tidied Wanda's hair, which looked a little messy. "I have wronged you all this time, so I can only hide in this place." After Wanda listened, a smile appeared on her face. "No, I think this kind of life is pretty good. I can take care of the flowers and plants every day and don't have to worry about making a living. I don't know how many times better than our previous life in Sokovia." "Don't worry, this won't last long." After resting in the villa for a night, Shumo returned to the manor. Sitting in the estate's fitness room, Shumo first opened the attribute list. Name: Shumo. Age: 20 years old. Strength: 103,560 kilograms. Speed: 390 meters s. Psychokinesis: 408,600 kilograms. Special ability: none. Points: 34,160 points. After a period of time, relying on the spiritual core in the mind, strength, speed and psychokinesis have been greatly improved. After killing hundreds of vampires, his points have risen to more than 30,000 again. However, he does not plan to redeem these points for the time being. By repeatedly using the spirit of vegetation, you can naturally increase your strength by a lot, but at most you can only reach the peak of the god of war. It is absolutely impossible to break through to the planet level. Moreover, it is not suitable to use the spirit of plants and trees crazily to increase strength in a short period of time. On the contrary, it is better to accumulate enough points and directly exchange them for treasures that will allow you to break through directly. There are many similar treasures: wooden spirit, red flame fruit, ningguang grass, heavenly thunder liquid. Either one can directly promote his warrior strength to the planet level. And the cheapest wooden spirit only requires more than 50,000 points. There are only about 20,000 points left, and I believe it won't take long to collect them all. Since there are no plans to exchange treasures for the time being, the only way to improve strength is to increase the amplitude of force. Now Shumo's Thunder Sword cultivation has reached the 3rd level, and his power amplitude is 3. Able to exert twice the strength of its original strength. The amplitude of psychokinesis reaches 6. It can control 6 flying knives at the same time, and the power of each flying knife can maintain maximum power. In contrast, the improvement of mental psychokinesis is easier. As for the secret method of mental psychokinesis, he chose a secret method called Illustration of Gods and Demons. The catalog contains a total of 99 maps. Each map is a complex three-dimensional map of gods and demons. With a thought, the seventh picture album appeared in his mind. These catalogs become more complex the further they go. The seventh one shows a kind of god and demon with a human body and 2 wings. Its entire body is outlined with psychokinesis threads. After Shumo really observed it for a moment, the mental psychokinesis was instantly released, turning into golden filaments that interspersed and combined in the midair in front of him. After a while, half of the body of the god and demon appeared in midair. As the number of mental power threads increased, Shumo felt more and more strenuous. Not good. Finally, at a certain moment, Shumo could no longer maintain the complicated threads in the air, and the entire phantom of gods and demons composed of spiritual power dissipated in the air with a boom. Shumo sighed. After resting for a moment, he started sketching in midair again. The sign of successful cultivation is that you need to outline the complete body shape of the entire god and demon within 1 minute. Cultivation time is always boring. In the next period of time, Shumo was in the villa, constantly increasing the amplitude of his mental power. After nearly a month, he directly increased the increase in psychokinesis to 12. And the process of psychokinesis, which constantly consumes the spirit like this, can be regarded as another kind of practice. The intensity of his mental psychokinesis is also constantly increasing. Now his psychokinesis has reached 432 tons. When 12 daggers are controlled at the same time, the superimposed impact force can reach more than 5,000 tons. It's time to completely eliminate Lao Wan's threat. Shumo stood on the balcony of the villa and disappeared into the sky in a flash. Nak Island, located about 300 nautical miles northeast of New York. The island is more than 80 nautical miles away from the nearest land. This also leads to the fact that there are not many permanent residents on the island. The total population of the only small town is only a few thousand people. On the seaside far away from the town, there are buildings with moss-covered exterior walls. This was once a private prison, but it was abandoned more than 10 years ago. Ever since there were rumors that the prison was haunted on the island a few years ago, people on the island generally would not come here easily. At this time, in a watchtower in the prison, standing was a mutant with light blue eyes. The mutant's eyes kept scanning the distant sea. When he saw a certain direction, his face looked slightly startled. For no other reason than in the direction he was looking at, a yacht was slowly heading this way. But the man didn't pay too much attention. Although the island is located in inaccessible waters, yachts driven by rich people come here from time to time. Under normal circumstances, it only takes a little action from them to frighten these life-hungry rich people away. Thinking of this, the man picked up the walkie-talkie in his hand. "Mike, there is a yacht approaching us, give him some color." Sure. In a small wooden house, a dark-skinned young man heard the words coming from the intercom. There was an excited smile on his face. "Don't worry, I guarantee you can give them an unforgettable memory." Putting down the walkie-talkie, the man walked out of the wooden house, looked at a small white dot appearing on the sea in the distance, raised the corners of his mouth slightly, took a run and jumped into the sea water. When the man entered the water, the surrounding water flow was under his control, forcing him to shuttle towards the yacht at high speed. On the yacht, Shumo and White Queen were sitting in the awning on the deck. Each held a glass of champagne in their hands. "There seems to be a small fish swimming towards us." White Queen took a sip of champagne and said with a smile on her face. At the same time, her eyes looked toward a certain location underwater. "Do you mind if I try out my new abilities on him?" "Just do whatever you want." The corners of Shumo's mouth rose slightly. After a period of practice, the White Queen's illusion skills have made great progress than before. Of course, the most important thing is that she finally formed her first soul seal. This means that as long as she shoots this soul mark into the opponent's sea of consciousness, she can obtain a permanent slave. Even if the opponent is hundreds of times stronger than her, there is no way to escape the control of the soul mark. Unfortunately, condensing soul seals is not an ordinary difficulty. Otherwise, it would not have taken a full month to successfully condense one. This is based on her mind control ability. This soul seal was naturally prepared by Shumo for Magneto. This is why he had to wait for more than a month. After all, against Magneto, the number of flying knives he controls does not make much difference. Even a few decades ago, Magneto could easily control a 1,000-ton submarine. As long as Magneto is prepared, even if he can control hundreds of flying knives, I'm afraid it won't have much effect on the opponent. His psychokinesis mainly serves the purpose of surprise. And using the soul seal to control the opponent was the best way he came up with to deal with Magneto after thinking about it. If the other party dares to scheme against him, Shumo will naturally not let him go easily. Compared with killing the other party, this method of permanently enslaving the other party is more in line with Shumo's interests. With Shumo's permission, White Queen's eyes flashed with silver light. Less than half a minute. There was an explosion on the water next to the yacht. The man named Mike jumped out and slapped on the deck like a dead fish. After taking control of Magneto, this person can be considered as our subordinate. Maybe he can come in handy in the future if he stays. White Queen explained. As the exact person who implemented it, she was naturally very clear about Shumo's plan. There are now a total of 138 mutants on the island. Most of them are mutants below level 3. Only 4 of them can be considered to have some combat effectiveness. They are Magneto, Red Tank, Pyro and Bonespur. White Queen Emma spoke out the news she got from Mike's mind. Bone-piercing man. Shumo looked stunned. He was no stranger to the 3 people in front of him, but he seemed to have never heard of the last one. Bone spikers can continuously generate bone spikes in their wrists, which can be used for throwing in as close-quarter weapons. White Queen explained with a smile. Shumo had a look of surprise on his face. He seemed to have some impression. However, this ability is not much better than that of ordinary people holding guns. Even this kind of ability is considered to be among the top in the Brotherhood. It is conceivable how the Brotherhood has declined. At this time, the mutants standing in the watchtower saw the yacht approaching the shore, but Mike, who went to stop it, couldn't get in touch. Suddenly I realized something was wrong. At that moment, he quickly ran towards the main building. But just after running 2 steps, his eyes rolled and he fainted. On the top floor of the prison, Magneto wearing a helmet stood in front of a special cell. Raven, I admit my previous mistakes. I just ask you to put down your hatred and join us again in fighting for the future of mutants. In the cell in front of Eric was a fair-skinned woman with short hair. The woman sat on the bed in the room and glanced outside without any emotion. I don't want to be ruthlessly abandoned again after being useless for one day. Eric heard this and quickly explained. Raven, listen, that wasn't my intention. Without your ability, continuing to follow us will only harm you. But Raven in the cell obviously didn't believe what the other party said. There was a mocking expression on his face. Really? Then I really blamed you wrongly. Raven, shut up. Seeing that the other party still wanted to make shameless excuses, Raven let out an angry roar, and then his face gradually calmed down, and he stared coldly at Eric outside the door. Kill me, or one day I will twist your head off your neck. As she spoke, the skin on the surface of her body flipped, and finally she turned into the appearance of a middle-aged man. Your mother died in my hands, don't you want to avenge her? You. Eric watched Raven transform into Black King Shao and kept mocking himself. He suppressed the anger in his heart. Raven, one day, you will understand that everything I do is for the continuation of mutants. After saying that, Eric walked away. Mystique Raven in the cell regained her appearance, looking coldly at Magneto who disappeared in the corridor. Just came downstairs. The figure of the fireman came forward. Eric, long time no see. Sure. Magneto looked at the approaching yacht with an uncertain expression on his face. The other mutants stood 10 meters behind him. You know, he has found White Queen several times before and asked her to join his Brotherhood. After all, the only thing missing from his Brotherhood is a mutant with telepathic abilities like the White Queen. If the other party joins, many of your ideas will be easily realized. But these times, without exception, they were rejected by the other party. Now that White Queen came over on her own initiative, he didn't think it was because she agreed to his previous request. However, he was not worried that the other party would be detrimental to them. After all, although his ability has not been completely restored, there is nothing to worry about, just relying on the strength he has recovered now. With Black Queen's helmet that can isolate mental power, he is not afraid of White Queen's psychic ability at all. Even if the White Queen controls all these mutants, he is confident that he can handle it. After all, among the remaining people, the strongest one is Red Tank, and Red Tank, like him, is immune to the opponent's psychic ability. The advantage is mine. Soon, the yacht docked on the shore. Unexpectedly, two people got off the boat, and the first person to get off the boat was a young man. The White Queen he valued very much was behind this young man. Who is this person? Seeing Shu Mo walking in front, Eric looked doubtfully at the White Queen behind. However, the White Queen had no intention of introducing her. Shu Mo, who was standing in front, had a chuckle on his face. "Mr. Eric, I heard that you are very short of money and wanted to get my support, so I came here to take a look. When it comes to investing, you have to let investors see the project and the benefits." After hearing what Shu Mo said, the expressions on the faces of everyone following Magneto changed at the same time. "Some time ago, I was thinking about how to force the other party to give up my family property obediently, but now the other party came to the door. It was obvious that the other party was not a good person." The expression on Magneto's face, who was standing in front, did not change at all. He walked forward in 2 steps and got in front of Shu Mo. "Boy, don't think that with Emma's support, you can show off your power in front of me." Hearing this, Shu Mo had a gentle smile on his face. "Oh, so in Mr. Eric's opinion, does this count as showing off one's power? Then what is this?" As soon as he finished speaking, Shu Mo kicked out his right foot like lightning. Magneto didn't even have time to react. He felt a pain in his stomach, and a strong force came from him. After knocking over several people behind him, he hit hard against a coconut tree not far behind. After a body bounce, he fell to the ground. A trace of blood spit out from his mouth. Court death. Seeing Shu Mo take action, the Red Tank standing aside rushed towards him. Pyro Allardyce, who originally wanted to take action, extinguished the flame in his hand after seeing this scene, turned around and ran towards Magneto. Shu Mo looked at the rushing Red Tank, raised his right hand, a layer of vibranium armor appeared on his arm, and slowly made a fist. Diamondization. He turned to Emma and reminded her. Then, turn sideways and punch. 3x strength increase. Boom. The fist collided with the shoulder of the charging Red Tank. 300 tons of power exploded instantly. After a meal, the Red Tank's body exploded into tens of thousands of skin fragments. On the other side, after Magneto was helped up by Pyro, he had no time to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth and suddenly distanced himself from him. He wasn't sure whether this was the real Pyro himself or the Pyro controlled by the White Queen. If the opponent takes off his helmet when he is not prepared, he will undoubtedly become a piece of meat on the White Queen's chopping board, at the mercy of the opponent. When the fireman saw Eric's actions, his expression froze. "Sorry, Allardyce, I have to be on guard. After all, you have just been controlled by the White Queen without your noticing." Pyro Allardyce had an ugly smile on his face. "I see." As soon as the two people finished speaking, there was a huge amount of noise, and a metal helmet fell at the feet of the two people. Only then did the two of them look towards Shu Mo's position. Seeing the hell scene with blood everywhere within a few dozen meters in front of the other party, the expressions on their faces changed drastically. "Ah!" A series of screams came from the crowd of mutants. Because they were right in front of Shu Mo. Their bodies were almost covered in shreds of Red Tank skin. Although each of these people has at least a few human lives in their hands, this is the first time they have encountered someone so cruel. "No, the devil, he is the devil." After a female mutant shouted, she ran away with a nervous breakdown. It seemed to have caused a chain reaction. Shouts of collapse sounded one after another. More than 1/3 of the mutants collapsed directly under the stimulation of the scene before them. One by one they scrambled to escape towards the rear. Magneto watched these mutants flee one after another, and the expression on his face gradually calmed down. "You leave first and leave the affairs here to me." After giving instructions to the Burning Man, he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and slowly rose up. "Not killing me directly would be the stupidest decision you have ever made in your life." Magneto, who was floating in the air, said coldly. Then he slowly spread his hands, and the surrounding magnetic field changed by huge amounts under his influence. In less than a few seconds, a powerful magnetic circle formed around him. After ensuring his own safety, his eyes fell on the White Queen behind Shu Mo. Emma, although I don't know what benefits the other party has given you, it's still too late for you to choose to give up on him and join the Brotherhood. White Queen smiled and shook her head. I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you. Hearing the other party's rejection again, Magneto's expression turned cold. It seems that you still don't understand the situation clearly. After I deal with this kid in front of you, you will change your mind. At this time, Shu Mo on the side also looked away from the system panel. Unexpectedly, just by killing one red tank, he gained more than 20,000 points. Right now, he was only about 3,000 points away from redeeming Muyajing. It seems like you think you have a guaranteed victory. Shu Mo raised his head and looked at Magneto in the sky, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. Magneto looked at Shu Mo calmly. The physical strength is limited after all. The only way is to be able to control the power of nature. You know nothing about my power. As soon as he finished speaking, within 1 kilometer around him, countless metals slowly flew off the ground under the control of the magnetic field. Next, I'll let you clearly see the gap between the two of us. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.